My name's Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast. At Mastermind Parenting, we're on a mission to support strong-willed kids and the families that love them. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this week. This week, I have Avery here with me again.
Hello.
Hello. And we're going to talk about the show Adolescence. If you haven't heard of it, it's on Netflix. There's everyone's talking about this show, Adolescence. So if you haven't heard about it, good for you. It means you're not as plugged in as the rest of us are. Maybe you're actually living your life and kicking it old school and not being on your freaking device every 5 seconds like the rest of us are.
Not us.
So good on you. But for the rest of us, you've probably heard about Adolescence or you've watched it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So there will be spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show, I will say watch it. And I was actually scared to watch it, and I didn't feel like it. And a couple of people said, you really should. And with the work that you do, you really need to watch this show, which of course just activated the rebel tendency in me and made me not want to watch it. So I really didn't want to watch it. And I watched about half of the first episode on a plane, and then it had stopped downloading or something. So all I could watch was about half of it. And I actually was happy. I was like, oh, okay. I tried to watch it. Oh, damn. Shucks. And then I was like, well, I really should. And the only reason not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I continued to watch was because Dad had watched 2 episodes, and he was like, I think you're going to want to watch this. So he was waiting on me. So he was like, what is taking so long? I'm dying to continue this show. I mean,
I'm shocked that you didn't finish it. That first episode had me.
I think I was in a fragile state, and it was like,
it's heavy.
We're not even going to talk about where I had just spent a week, and I was in a fragile state. So I think I just wanted to watch the Gilmore Girls, which I have also been watching, and, get back into my nurturing, cozy, I needed to be nurtured.
It's such a comfort show.
Right. So I wasn't in the mood. So I reluctantly continued watched the rest of that first episode. And then once I watched the second episode, I was like, oh, now I get it. And I was hooked. So for everyone out there who hasn't watched or is thinking maybe you don't want to watch, me too, I was the same. But you want to pause this right now and come back to this episode after you've watched Adolescence.
Also, if it helps, this is what got me to watch it because I was also resistant. When you said it was 4 episodes, I was like, oh, that's an afternoon.
Yeah. So it's like a short binge. It's 4 episodes, and it's an important show. I mean, people are praising it like they're praising. I mean, everybody is all of a sudden thinking they're like a cinematographer, and they have all this knowledge about how shows are shot.
It's filmed in such a cool way because every episode is a single shot. They don't cut. There's no cuts in it. They film it I guess documentaries aren't exactly filmed like that, but it feels like it's all happening in real time, which is adds to the dramatics.
Well, I didn't know what that meant, and Dad kept saying, it's all filmed in one shot, and he kept saying it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I didn't really know what that meant. I just wanted him to stop talking. And then he said it, I don't know, for the 25th time. And I said, did you read an article and now all of a sudden you're a cinematographer and you have all this knowledge? He was like, no, I didn't even read an article, which I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, that's a lie.
That's a lie. There's been a ton of articles out about the way but what I understand, what makes it so cool is that, since there's no cuts, which means that there's a lot of improvising. So the actors, it's kind of like, I would imagine it's a little bit like Curb Your Enthusiasm in the sense that there's a lot of, it's like, here's the basic script. And I think this had a script. I mean, there's definitely lines, but I think there's a lot of improvising. And the article that I read that made me finally understand it is that part of what you feel as the viewer is that not only is it an intense topic, so you feel the intensity of the actors because it's one take. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens in this take, like that's going to be the episode. So yeah, so the intensity that you feel, like the act, everybody's saying like the acting is incredible. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a big part of it is that we feel that intensity of like, like it's like camera time, go.
The
And there
best
is
actor
no,
in the show was the kid. The way that
who,
he filled space.
did you read that this was his first acting role?
It was?
Yeah.
Oh my God. He was I mean, like, I was scared of him, but like, he was
Okay,
incredible.
let's set it up. Let's set it
Okay.
up. So
Okay.
so I finished it like a week or two ago, and Avery just finished it
This morning.
um, this morning. So set it up for everyone. Again, if you haven't watched it, please pause this because we're going to have all kinds of spoilers here. And we're really going to break it down and talk about what we think the themes are, why we think it's so important to watch this, maybe even to consider watching it if you have teenagers and kids that are on their own devices, like like if you're really honest, on their own devices without you screening everything they're seeing. Um,
Which, how could
I
you?
I know. I mean I know, but some parents actually think that they know what everything their kids are doing online, and maybe they
Mm-hmm.
do. I shouldn't say it's a lot to keep up with, but yeah. So okay, so now you give a synopsis of what the show's about.
Okay, so the show starts. It's this family, seemingly average family in England. I don't know where in England. Um, and it's this like these two parents, their older daughter, younger son, and SWAT teams or whatever it is in England, like raid their home.
And son is 13 and like a prepubescent, very innocent looking 13.
Yeah, adorable, adorable and tiny.
Hmm.
And they take him, arrest him. Basically, are saying like, "Hey, this."
Like out of his bed,
Yeah,
like
like
swoop in.
he wet himself. He was
Hmm.
so scared. It was really, I mean, it was like you're feeling and you're like, and you don't know what's happened at this point, so you're so sad for him. Um, and they take him into the detention center, and they're basically like, this girl, like they were like, she was murdered. This third or whatever, 13-year-old
13.
girl, I think, yeah.
Yeah, in his grade. Yeah.
And he was like, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, like so convincing that he did not do it. Like he believed that he did not do it. His dad believed him, and they basically pull him in for questioning. That scene was really intense. It was long, no cuts, remember. And they're asking him questions, and eventually they're like, "We have a tape," and they pull up the tape, and it's him stabbing this girl like in a parking lot, like multiple times, killing her dead. And you see the dad go through grief. And basically, it's this whole story of it follows a bunch of different perspectives, but how did he get like this? And how he's convinced himself like that it wasn't wrong, or I don't know. He just like keeps saying, I didn't do it until the last episode where he's like, I'm gonna plead guilty.
But I thought the interesting thing was in the way it was shot, or maybe, I don't know. It's like when they had the video of him, because like it happens, it's just like these kids that just like hang out around town. They must live in a somewhat of a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just like, middle school kids and they're hanging out around town. And so it's like in front of like, a Walmart or something or
Yeah, it
whatever.
wasn't like he like did it in the woods.
Right. So it was like in front, and I mean there's security cameras. And so they have the whole incident on the security camera. Um, and a lot of the show, especially early on, like I'm feeling for the kid, but like I feel like I'm the parents. I don't want to believe it's true. I'm 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 rooting for this not to be true, for this to be a mistake. And you haven't seen the video yet, but I'm just thinking about this innocent child and how scared he seems. Like he seems innocent, and I'm thinking this fragile child, prepubescent, ripped out of his bed. Like this is a trauma. I'm worried about him being traumatized by
Right.
even the way the SWAT team came in
Mm-hmm.
and traumatized this family and pulled him out of the bed. And now he's being yanked away from his parents and being driven down to, wherever the questioning site, the jail, the prison, whatever it was, and or the detention center. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, this little kid is going to be so traumatized by this whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then the parents and the sister, I'm thinking, this poor family, they're all going to be so traumatized about this whole experience. This is
That
awful.
doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm feeling the pain and the anguish of these parents, and specifically the dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps, and it's very clear that the little boy feels connected to his dad, and his dad's the one that's kind of reassuring him, um and all the officers were really nice to the kid, and there's this one cop that's riding with him, and he's basically letting him know, like, don't say anything, basically like trying to protect the kid, like, don't say anything, wait, this is what's going to happen next, you want to wait, like you want to be able to have a lawyer, you want to wait until you're with your dad, like you
Yeah,
get
they
to
were
have.
treating him like he was innocent almost.
Yeah, like they
Mm-hmm.
were really treating him in a much more civilized way than I would imagine things
They
go
do
down in
here.
America. Yeah.
Yeah.
um
I was thinking that
and
too.
yeah, I was also thinking that, like, it was interesting, even just like in the way they spoke, like all this intense, all this intensity is going on, and like, your kid has been taken from you, and like the dad, who you can tell is an intense guy, um, he's calling everyone love.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that?
Well, I was watching it with Baxter, my boyfriend, for people that don't know, and he was saying, "God, an English accent puts me at ease." He's like, "It's so calming the way that they're talking to everyone." Because we were
Hmm.
noticing he was like love and bud and all of these like terms of affection. I was like, "Oh my God, I would be losing my mind."
Right, like we'd be like, "Give me my kid back. What are you doing? This is unjust. I'm gonna sue you," whatever.
Right.
And he was like talking to the female officer, or whoever. He was like, "Okay, love." Like that was, and I was like, they're so, they're it's so civilized, even though
Mm-hmm.
you could tell he was going through so much anguish. There's like a level of civility that I thought was interesting. Anyway, we digress. So, so then, like, when they, have the kid in questioning, he gets to like choose basically like a guardian, a guardian that, I don't know, what did they call it?
It's
The adult.
a like a represented adult, basically,
Yeah.
something like that.
Since he's a
Yeah.
minor, he gets to have an adult of his choosing, and he chooses his dad. So his dad's in there with him when he's getting questioned, and that's when they show him the tape, that they have the footage, and you just see the dad, like, and he had just said to the kid when it was just the two of them, like, tell me the truth, tell me the truth, and the kid's like, I promise I didn't do it, dad, I
Mm-hmm.
promise, I promise. And then, a few minutes later, here's the footage of the kid
Ugh,
stabbing his
and the kid
classmate.
seems so normal and
Yeah.
so innocent. That's the most disturbing part to me is like I think he was normal
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Can
Yeah,
happen to anyone.
and that's kind of the message, is if it could happen to this kid and this family, um, this is a real, we're in a crisis situation. Like it could happen to anyone. And
Right.
so let's all pay attention, and let's all solve this mystery and figure out how it happened. Like what led him to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though they had the footage, I secretly was still hoping that somehow it wasn't him. Like I was
I
still feeling
yeah.
delusional.
I was. Less feeling delusional, more this is so wrong, and I would never hope this in real life, but I was hoping it because it was a TV show. I was hoping that the dad had done something terrible to him
Mm,
because I wanted there to be a more solid reason than the kid had access to internet.
hmm
Because that's so scary to me. I'd be like, okay,
hmm
maybe if you're sexually assaulted as a child, you're susceptible.
hmm
But
hmm
like the fact that like maybe the dad just had like a little bit of a temper and would raise
hmm
his voice.
hmm
Like and honestly, like throughout the show, when the dad would raise his voice, and obviously he did lose it in the last episode, but he would raise his voice, but it was never like saying to the family like you guys are dumb or you're stupid or whatever. He raises his voice in moments of passion where he's like still reassuring them even though his voice is loud.
hmm
It
hmm
never felt like it was anger directed at the family. And so it just like I was so scared by the fact that the kid had no reason to go down that path.
hmm Like
Yeah.
you were like, at least if like the dad was a super bad guy.
Right.
But like, I mean, this was a normal family and it was a
Mm-hmm.
good mom and a good dad and they loved each other. And yeah, like the older sister was like normal and sweet and cared about her brother, like not crazy, overly sweet, but just like she
Normal.
cared. Yeah, she was normal and she was there and she was crying and she was upset and it was a connected family. Like that was the part that was so disturbing is, and I think that's the story, that's the main storyline is, you know, our kids, if kids are at such an impressionable age, are engaging, you know, in this sort of, it's almost like this, I called it, what did I call it? Like a social media underworld. But you said it's not just like a kid social
You
media
said it.
under.
You said it.
What did
Yeah,
I
like a
say?
kid underworld.
Yeah. But the reason why I think it's a kid underworld is because the undercover cops go to the school to question the kids. And it's pretty disturbing. Like, for how civilized all the adults were seeming, like in talking to the people that had, what is it called when you book a juvenile? Like he was under
Just
arrest, but you're
taken
not.
into custody.
Yeah, he was taken into custody. That's the word. That's the term. For how lovely the father was, calling everyone love and bud. You now fast forward to cops going to the high school, to the middle school and high school to question the kids. And the kids are so disrespectful. They're disrespectful to the cops. They're
Oh my
disrespectful to the
god.
teachers. It
It
was like a
filled me up
shit
a
show.
wall. It was the most dysfunctional school I've
Yeah.
ever seen. That one kid in the class that kept like shouting stuff out. I wanted to punch him right in his little tiny face.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
annoying.
they were openly bullying kids and they were bullying one of the undercover cops kids. Like his son went to this school and his son was so sweet.
I know. I wanted to give him a hug.
I know, he might have had a little taste of the tism.
Yeah, in the
And
cutest way.
but he was so with it too, but he obviously got bullied on a regular basis by the other kids. And but yeah, so all the kids were like openly bullying each other, nasty to the adults. It was kind of just crazy. And but it was the cop's son who is a little quirky, who basically said to his dad, in his own way, like, you might think you're so with it and cool, but in this day and age, and they established a storyline where the cop, supposedly was Mr. Cool back when he was growing up. Like one of the kids was like, I hear you were popular.
Yeah, he
Did
was like
you,
really handsome.
yeah, like, did you get a lot of ladies? And the cop's like, I didn't do too bad. Like he was,
Hmm.
and now his quirky son is, basically pulls his dad aside and is like, you have no clue what's going on.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
he decodes what was really going on all these social media posts, that the boy, the murderer, was. being accused, like all this evidence that they have brought up, he was like, you're not even seeing what was
Yeah,
really being said
they
here.
thought the evidence was some like basically the girl that was killed had been commenting on the killers um on a social media post, like different emojis, like the red pill and like all sorts of stuff. And they thought like, oh, they were friends because she was commenting on his post. And the kid was like, are you dumb? Every emoji has a meaning. Like this yellow heart means this, and this red heart means this. And he was like, and that red pill means she's calling him an incel. And
And
they were like,
explain what an incel is.
an incel. I mean, it stands for involuntarily celibate. Did you know that?
Well, I
Um,
only learned it from the show. Did you know
oh,
it before? You knew it before the
yeah,
show.
I knew it before.
Hmm.
But basically, it's like a kid that like no one will ever want to have sex with him, and so they turn into like the Andrew Tates of the world, like the creepy ones that are like women are only attracted to 20%, 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men, and like all of these horrible things, like biologically men are meant to rule women and women are meant to be subservient and blah 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 blah, which gross. And
But those
you know
that community, you think is made up, the Andrew Tate toxic masculinity, kind of movement. You think that community, the people who are attracted to that community, have been labeled incels, involuntary celibates. You think that's the
right,
main
been labeled
makeup?
incels, or maybe like have had their hopes with women dashed a little bit, like they go for girls and they get rejected, which happens often, so a lot of times girls don't want to be bothered. Sorry, it's a different world. um but it like they turn it into this anger fueled rage that is like, I need an explanation other than something that I'm doing wrong. It has to
Hmm.
be something wrong with women.
Mm.
I was talking to you about this a little bit, and I talked to Baxter about it, but because he asked me, he was like, why are boys so susceptible to that? I don't understand what's so convincing about that argument. He was like, do they not speak to women on a regular basis? He's like, I don't understand. And I said,
Wait, what argument?
the
What?
argument of like men are biologically better and women,
Mm.
you need to tell them what to do. Like, and if they don't like it, then you make them like it, like things like that, which is what Andrew Tate literally says. And
Hmm.
I said, that biological argument is so strong. And as someone who's studied, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, like I can understand. I don't agree with it, and we're above our base instincts, but like, um, our word warning, but when men like rape women and they say, the biological reasoning for it is we are put on this earth to reproduce and spread our seed. And if women don't like it, like it shouldn't matter because biologically that is our purpose.
Mm.
I can understand that. Like that makes sense as an argument, but we're humans, like there's a reason that we are the most developed species. We don't operate from instinct.
Right. We're not
And
chimpanzees.
we're not chimpanzees. And it's so dangerous because as a full grown human who can reason and use logic, I know that that's like a really messed up argument. But a 13-year-old boy who just wants a reason for why girls don't like him
Mm.
and a reason to take what he wants,
Hmm.
especially when you're that hormonal, like that's so dangerous.
Hmm.
Really
Hmm.
freaky.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think the, yeah, the, like explaining what all the emojis mean, like, and a lot of the reviews I've read, it talks about how, so often there's art, books, movies, shows that are made to try and depict what's really going on, this world of, you know, the internet and growing up with it and social media and how it affects kids and how it affects kids' brains. Um, but the reviews I've read are that most of the time it's like a light version, or it's almost like an ABC after school special version. It's like done super lame, and kids who are in the know, they're like, you guys are ridiculous. That's
Right.
not, you don't even get it. But that this show was like mirrored reality the
No,
closest.
they nailed it. And it's
Hmm.
funny because I think they get it wrong so often because it's hard to articulate
Hmm.
like what those emojis mean, how it's communicated, but like the way like when they went through that whole explanation of like what each colored heart means and like
Hmm.
whichever one, like pink means horny and yellow means happy and blah 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 blah. I was like, I've never thought about it with like words, but that is what they all mean.
And you just knew it.
And I just knew it. Like that's just
Mhm.
how I use them.
And so, uh, where did you feel like you said that you think one of the, like before we started recording, I said, what do you think the main themes are? And you said one of the main themes I thought was parent blame. I want you to
Mm.
unpack that. Like, did you feel like they were blaming the parents or the parents were blaming themselves or what? Yeah.
I think the parents were blaming themselves the entire. I mean, even when like they showed the tape to the dad and he's sitting there with the kid and he has that emotional reaction, the kid tries to touch him and he pulls away because he just like, even though he had that physical recoiling from his son, I felt his self blame. He's like,
Mhm.
what did I do? What did I do? And then he communicated that throughout the whole show. What have I done? And at that last episode, which was so heart wrenching, I was sitting there crying. The parents had this big tearful discussion of, we created him.
Mhm.
How did we create a murderer? What
Mhm.
did we do wrong? How did we do it wrong? And they're going back and forth with each other like, you're such a good dad, you're such a good mom. And the dad's like, my dad beat me. And I said I would never do that to my kids. She was like, you didn't. And they're going back and forth trying to support each other, but they're both being like, but what did I do? And it never, I mean, and they didn't um, solve that at the end. We were left with that parent blame, when he tucks in he tucks in the kid's bear at the end and kisses the bear's head like it's his son.
Mhm.
Um, but it was so heartbreaking because as a viewer, I knew it wasn't their fault.
Mhm. Well, I think it's like something terrible like this happens and we we want to, it's like when you were like, God, I hope the dad did something bad to him, so at least there's something that explains this. Because if a normal kid from a normal family, right, like really good kid from a really good family could be susceptible to murdering their classmate because of, he's fallen into the whatever he's fallen into. He's been,
Mm-hmm.
behind closed doors, all on his video games,
She
you
rejected
know.
him, by the way, for anyone listening that hasn't seen it. She
Yeah.
rejected his romantic advances.
Yeah. Well, she rejected him, but we haven't even talked about what happened in episode 3. But before
Mm,
we talk about episode 3, which to me was like the most powerful
it
episode of the
was.
series,
Mm-hmm.
um, I felt like there was, there's something that I've been thinking about in terms of like the parents blaming themselves or looking for, I think it was like somewhere they're like, we created him. So they're trying to, I think, have an honest conversation with each other and like do what responsible adults do, which is some self-reflection and, not argue. And it's like, we can't argue with the reality. The reality is our son murdered his classmate
Mm-hmm.
and we raised him in this home and that happened. And so it's like these are good people and so they do what I think adults do, which is like something terrible happened, there was a mistake that was made, let's figure out why. And it didn't just, it's like I think they knew that it's not that he's not a sociopath, like he was a normal little boy who grew up. And so I think I was respecting their self-reflection a
I was
lot.
too. And you know what? I take back what I said when I said it was like not resolved at all. There was a little bit of understanding that they grasped when they're like, how did we make him? How did we make him? And then the daughter, so sweet and empathetic And they're like, how did we make her? And the mom said, in the same way we made him.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, so they know there was outside influences as well.
So the part that where my brain goes though is this concept, and I haven't heard about this really in any of the reviews. Well, one review. I saw one with a child psychiatrist or psychologist who also agrees with this. I think there's this topic of generational patterns, and I felt like they sort of planted the seed when they were interrogating the boy early on, and they were trying to like understand his relationships with his family. Um, he said, or maybe it was in episode 3. I can't remember when it was, but at some point he was talking about his dad and that his dad was a really good dad and he loved his dad. And that his dad, I mean, one time he got really mad and he tore down the shed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, which he said it where it's like his dad was obviously in a fit of rage and tore down this old shed at their house. And I'm like, huh. So he's a really good dad. He's he feels really connected to his dad. Oh, but there was this one time. So most of the time my dad has his shit together. But there was this one time where he got really out of control and he tore a shed down in a fit of rage. Like, that's
Oh.
something to note. That's
Yeah.
something to note. And so then when in episode 3, when he's getting questioned by the psychologist, who is a really good psychologist and really knows how to connect with him and bring out his truth.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime she would try to make conversation that involved his dad, he would get very defensive. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he would get very defensive. He was very protective of his dad. And then in that last episode, when the dad said, I promised I was going to become a very different dad than my dad was. My dad was an alcoholic. My dad, hit me. I was never going to do that. And you could tell the dad was a really good guy. But the tension I felt, especially in that 4th episode, was everyone felt like they were walking on eggshells around him.
Oh my
So,
God. When they
right.
got back in that van,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the dad had like this fit of rage. Someone had written this slur that basically means like sex offender. I had to look it up.
We did too.
Yeah, it was a British slang.
Mm-hmm.
He found the kids after they went to like their version of Home Depot or whatever, and like shook the kid up, threw the kid's bike, splashed paint all over his own van to cover up the word, like insane. And they get back in the car, and the mom and the sister are sitting there silent, crying, not saying a word. And then when he answers a call from the kid that's in jail, and he seems normal.
Mm-hmm.
And the mom and the sister are silent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that made me feel like even though he was working, he used so much willpower to not be the same dad that he had, to not be explosive, except for like in the rare moments where he tears down the shed in a fit of rage. But so 95% of the time, he's keeping that rage, just beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though he's not beating anyone, even though he's not screaming his head off, even though he is better than his own father was, you can tell it's still in him and he's doing everything in his power to not become his own father.
Right.
And so just because he's not doing those things, that explosiveness is just lurking beneath the surface and you feel it and his whole family feels it and they're all walking on eggshells around him because it's almost like he's a volcano just on the verge of erupting.
Mm-hmm.
And they sense that energetically. And so, even though this is a normal family, I think that generational trauma of that male rage, that he's using everything, with all his might to not, behave the way his father did, it's still there lurking just beneath the surface. And that has been this family's reality. That has been, I think, rooted in this child's existence,
Right.
is that generational male rage.
And it was the exact same fit of rage that we saw when he was with the therapist. He's in that room. She's questioning
In
him.
episode
In episode,
3.
she was awesome, and she was questioning him and having a lovely conversation. She brought him a sandwich, she brought him hot chocolate, and they were having like a really normal conversation, bantering, adorable. And all of a sudden, she'd say the wrong thing, usually about his dad, and he would scream his head off, throw his chair, get in her face, like scary, get in her face. You could see her kind of shake a little bit. She started crying after the session because it scared her. He was like, "What, am I scaring you? I'm 13. What do you think I'm going to do? Am I scaring you?" And she's so calm in it, but I was like, oh, there it is.
Right, there it is. It's like he just seemed like this innocent, sweet boy, just like the dad is like, "Oh, love, can you get me such and such?" Seems so sweet, and the kid seems so sweet. But just lurking beneath the surface is rage.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, like, we know more, and he knows more than his father did. His father was an alcoholic. His father, it was a different time. His father's beating his kids. But this father's like, in this day and age, you don't do that, right? Like, I made a promise, I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yet that rage and that intensity is still there, which at
Right.
any moment you just feel like he could snap. And now the 13-year-old kid, obviously, that is the pattern that he has within him too. And, you know, coupled with all that he was experiencing at school, and the Andrew Tate stuff and the
Mm-hmm.
messaging, all that toxic masculinity and all that disgusting messaging, and left to his own devices in his room behind closed doors gaming.
Right.
um
The part I had the most a visceral reaction to, the therapist obviously, but when, and Baxter also had a little bit of a visceral reaction, they reveal that the girl who got killed, her nudes got leaked and went around to all the boys at school. And he said when he asked her out and she rejected him, he had gone up to her and been like, "Hey, I'm really sorry that this happened to you." And they were like, "Oh, like basically, like, did you feel bad?" And he was like, "No, she was weak. She was in a vulnerable state, and I knew I could swoop." And she basically said to him, like, "I'd never be that desperate." Which is mean, but
Wait,
like,
I unpack that more. So she had some pictures that she
she
had
sent to a boy.
stupidly sent to a boy who probably coerced her to send them.
Yeah,
And
that's what he
then,
did say, that he asked for them.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and this was not to the murderer boy, it was some other boy in school. And then the other boy in school passed those pictures of this girl around. Then all the kids were calling her a slut, a whore, whatever, making fun of her. And so her reputation goes way down. So her social currency, which was higher than his social currency, now plummets because of the nudes that get leaked. So he goes up and pretends to like have compassion for her, and and like says like, "Hey, what did he say? I'm sorry that."
Yeah, he was, I don't remember word for word, but he was just basically like, "I'm really sorry that this happened to you. Like, he shouldn't have done that to you. Would you want to go to the fair with me?"
Yeah, so he then gives her an olive branch, which seems like he's just being a nice guy. But then when questioned further, he admits, "Oh, no, no, no. Her, basically her social currency got knocked down. So she's in a place of weakness now
He kept
because
saying she was weak. She
she
was
was weak."
weak.
So now, and he said, I mean, he had a terrible self view. He said that, he was considered ugly. He was ugly. He was a
He
loser.
wasn't.
I know he wasn't ugly at all, but that, obviously on the social chain, he felt like he was at the bottom. And so now that her position has been lowered, he sees weakness. He goes up, pretends to be compassionate, but it was just all a manipulation,
Yeah.
and asks her out. And even when she's in this position of weakness, she rejects him, and he gets pissed
And after
because,
that is when she started commenting on all of his social media, the red pills, spreading things like he was an incel. Like she basically bullied him. Not an excuse for murder. Um, and it just fueled his rage.
yeah, so after he asked her out, she then starts torturing him a little bit. Like how dare you? How dare you have the nerve to ask me out? So now I'm going to insult you with all these emojis in the secret language. And that was fueling his rage behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a story about how all of the factors can create evil. Like,
Hmm.
I thought it was so interesting that they showed the dysfunction of that school because I think lack of education is a big thing. I mean, the cop said they're not even teaching them; they just have video screens up. They're just
Hmm.
letting them watch movies.
Well, it's just kids raising other kids. That's the bottom line. It's like
Right.
there's a parenting book that's called Hold On to Your Kids. And it's talking about teenagers, and that teenagers are going to want to, they act like you're the last person that they want to be around, but they need you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because if left to their own devices, whether it's teenagers or whether it's just like the elementary school kids who have play date, play date, play date, play date, like kids will just end up raising each other. And in this day and age especially, like this is what happens during COVID. All these kids, and that's what the family was saying. Like, you know he wanted the device, he wanted the screen, he wanted the things, and they let him be behind closed doors on his device. And I think that was really common during COVID. It was like,
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and there was this one house that I didn't like to sleep over at, and I remember I went over there and they were showing me like there was this one really scary video where a car is driving down the road and a face pops up and I hated it. And then, playing Grand Theft Auto where there are like strippers and whatever. And I have had friends since that I grew up with since elementary school being like, they showed me porn.
mm-hmm,
I watched porn over there in third grade.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, oh my God, thank God my mom had boundaries and said, don't go over there anymore.
mm-hmm,
Um, there was no policing.
mm-hmm.
Like, they were showing other kids the messed upness that was happening over at their house, the dysfunction, and like spreading this, it was so. I have um, my best friend actually said, she remembers them doing that to her. She was like, it was traumatic. I still think about it.
Well, I remember hearing stories, and then I was that crazy mom who I would ask before you went over. I mean, that's why most of the play dates were at our house. And let me tell you something. I had a scarlet letter in our little community that I would say, do your kids have access to a computer, to the internet, to YouTube? Are they allowed to watch that in their room? Where, how do they access the internet? What kind of screen? Is it like a computer out in the kitchen, or do they have, I don't think there were iPads at the time, but I was like, do they have devices in their own room? Are they allowed to be in their own room on things? And people thought and back then when you were in like third grade, I mean, that was crazy talk because it wasn't like it is now where
Mm-hmm.
I just heard a statistic that 40% of 2-year-olds have their own iPad, like have their own screen, their own tablet, their own device.
Mm-mm.
And so it was different, but I remember people being taken aback. And that particular mom, when I said, are your kids allowed to go on screens without adult supervision? And she was like, what do you mean by that? And I had to go in and explain, like, are they allowed to be on a device like in their bedrooms? Or is there just like a computer in a common area where anyone could walk by and see what they're doing? Do they have privacy when it comes? And she was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to police my kids. Like, that's not. And I was like, okay,
Girl,
well,
they're 9.
I was like, well, I don't let Avery be on devices without adult supervision in a common area. So if she comes over, it's not up to you to police her, but I will, I just want you to know that like she'll be calling me to come home, or she's going to be responsible for policing herself. And then I just like didn't let you go over there much. But I would say to you before you went over there, if you went over there for like a group play date or a party or something like that, if they had, because they always were having fun things going on. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to say you can't go over there. I just made you responsible. I was like,
I mean,
our rules.
I just got
You're
a memory of, there was a computer and it was kind of in a back room. And I remember they were on the computer and I was kind of standing towards the door because I was like, I'm not supposed to be doing. I knew it was against the rules. I hated breaking the rules as a kid, and I knew it was against the rules, and so I kind of leaned
except
over.
for going into the gift closet and stealing things.
Well, that doesn't count.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
liked I liked gifts too much. Um, it was and climbing on my neighbor's roof.
And
Um,
adding extra time to the timer counting down when you were playing with Webkins on the computer in the
and I'd
kitchen.
sometimes not brush my teeth.
Oh, lovely. Okay, go ahead.
But I would linger by the door because I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, and I was almost honestly like almost like a getaway, like I had a quick exit. So I think that's why I never received the brunt of what was going on over there. But I know a lot of kids that did.
Yeah, because I was like, God only knows what the mom said about me and probably to all her friends, like, because I was crazy. And if you were ever going over there, it was like special occasion. I was very clear. These are the rules. If you see something, you can't unsee it. And this beautiful, magical thinking brain that comes up with all of the crazy games that you're constantly leading Corey through and your friends through, like those days will be over because you will see an image that is so scary and you won't be able to get that image out of your mind and it will get in the way of all of your creativity and you won't be
I
able
used
to
to think
come
you were
up with
talking about
it.
like monsters.
Hmm. Yeah.
I truly didn't get the sex talk till fifth grade. She really, she was careful.
I know. When Avery was like 16 and you said to me one time, you were like,
Sorry.
how did you shelter me without me realizing that you were sheltering me? When you
And
like,
sometimes I think back to the sex talk that we had in fifth grade, and like some of the things you said, like, are hilarious.
let's not go into it.
Told me, just like, you gave me like a Christian, like a religious sex talk.
First of all, that was the one from when you were in first grade and you asked me how babies were made.
You said kissing a lot.
No, when you said, that's a different conversation. We digress. We'll
Okay.
go into that another time. Um, okay. So back to yeah, like kids being in a room with the door closed on their devices, especially like, 13-year-old. But I have to tell you, now that I've learned what I've learned in the last couple of years, like I kick myself that I finally gave in and let you have a lot more privacy when you were in high school. Like I wish I would have had more rules around these things and kept to my guns. Like, I think I was just so worn down by high school
Mm-hmm.
and I had sheltered you guys as much as I possibly could. I
Mm-hmm.
think A, I was tired, and B, I was just like, starting to think like you can't shelter them forever.
Right.
And so I wish I never would have let you be on Instagram scrolling forever behind closed doors as a teenager in high school. Like I wish I would have had more rules around all of this for longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the timing. Like for me, it was body stuff because I was scrolling through Instagram models or Victoria's Secret models or whatever and being like, oh, I don't look
Yeah,
like
but
that.
I mean, it's like, boys, I was just listening and that's the thing is that boys are affected by different things than girls are affected by, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still destructive. And I thought this show covered all of these very difficult topics in such an artful and realistic way. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so glad it wasn't more than 4 episodes because I think they did what they needed
They
to
nailed
do.
it.
And
Yeah.
they nailed it.
Yeah, and you know what, Baxter, I was just talking to him and he was like, wait, so how did the episode end? I was like, what do you mean you were sitting with me? When it like he kissed the bear and he tucked it in and that was the end, and he was like, oh, they didn't get into more of like what the kid saw and what he was reading. I was like, no, that's the whole point, is you don't know what your kid's reading. It
Mm-hmm.
alludes to it and you know because you're, you know, you live on this earth, but like they don't need to go into the nitty gritty of exactly what he was doing. Honestly, like that's more dangerous, to give more of a platform to the evil. Like I think they did a perfect job of showing just how discreet and just how, you know, unpredictable it can be.
Mm-hmm. They also did a good job of just alluding to how this boy was susceptible to falling into this underworld and basically like having his brain possessed by all these, toxically masculine messages,
Mm-hmm.
that made this boy from a regular family, go to the dark side and become a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
But they said there was one story he shared with the psychologist about how he wasn't a sporty boy, and at some point he was playing, soccer or something.
Just
And
thinking about this.
yeah, you describe it. Do you remember it?
He basically, and the dad gets into it a little bit in the last episode as well. Um, he's like, I was never sporty. He was bad at soccer, and they would stick him in goal because he didn't know he couldn't play. And he said he would feel himself fumble the ball or miss the ball or do a bad play, and he'd look up, and his dad couldn't even look at him. And you're like, no, there's no way that that's true. Like, that's so sad. And the dad confirmed it in the last episode. He was like, you know, I tried to take him to footy, you know, soccer. I tried to, you know, take him to boxing. That lasted 10 minutes. He was like, but in soccer, you know, they stuck him in the goal. And when he would mess up, he was like, I couldn't even look at him.
Mm.
I was like, ah,
Hmm.
yikes.
Yeah, just the
Like,
shame.
let your
It's
kid, and the kid was arty. He was good at drawing. I was like, let your kid be arty.
But the dad was a good dad. He's showing up for his kids' soccer games. He's wanting to support him. He's not understanding because the dad hasn't done his own healing work. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's why there's still so much rage bubbling just beneath the surface, that he's using everything in his might, all of his willpower to keep from becoming his own father. Because, it's not like it's a guy who's gone through like deep trauma healing and therapy and released all of this from his own body. So he's always just keeping it barely at bay.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 so this is not like a self, actualized human being. And he's
Right.
just wanting to be a good dad. And in our
Mm-hmm.
in our world, it's like, oh, a good parent goes to their kids' games and gets them involved in group and team sports
Right.
and activities. And so he's like, check, check. And he's sitting in the stands, and then his son looks at him, and it's just like a moment. And he doesn't know, because he's not self actualized. He doesn't know why he feels shame in that moment and can't even look at his kid. And then his kid downloads that, that intensifies his own shame that he feels.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
know.
it's so honestly cool how we watched the kid murder this little girl in cold blood, and you still feel bad for him the entire
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
You're just
Hmm.
sad. You're so sad for him.
So sad. So
Mm-hmm.
sad. Wanting something to make it not true. To
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm dying
I
for a
wanted
plot
him to be a
twist.
victim so bad. Like I was like anything but for this kid to be that evil.
That's so that I was just I me my brain, my delusional brain was like, I want there to be a plot twist of there was some doppelganger that looked just like him, that was dressed in the same
Well, I think
outfit.
I understood the premise of the show too much going in to think that that was a possibility.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
knew that the kid gets red pilled. I was very aware of that fact because I've listened to people talk about the show. But for me, it was like even though that kid being a victim would have been so heart wrenching to watch and probably would have honestly wrecked me more emotionally, I would have left the show with a better taste in my mouth because I was
Yeah.
like, ugh, that's
Hmm.
you can explain that.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. It was heart-wrenching and important and well done and
And go watch it.
and
Sorry, we
yeah,
just told you everything that happened.
and unfortunately very much rooted in reality. And yeah, I mean, I think there's probably lots of people who are like me who are like, we want to believe that he didn't do it. We don't want to watch it. We don't believe this is happening. Like, it's happening. And we have to know these things. And I mean, it's like, I'm like, knowledge is power. So now, and I think watching things like this, especially with your teenagers, um, I, you know, I've heard different things like, oh, this is too scary for teenagers. I'm like, watching it with your teenagers who, if they are engaging on devices and on social media, just like you, like they're aware of all this going on. And so now all of a sudden you have a conversation like this is just going to make your job easier as a parent so that when you do have rules and when you are trying to keep them safe and your kid is arguing against all those rules, like now we have a foundation to talk about why we have these rules in place and why we're doing these things and why it's important that we keep the dialogue open and we talk about how they're feeling and what they're going through at school and what the real deal is. Like, I feel like something like this is just a bridge to make your job easier as a parent.
Right. It's just communicating through story.
Yeah, once again, communicating through story. So I would encourage parents of kids that are old enough to have their own devices and old enough to be on social media. Um, I think if you're old enough to have your own device and if you're old enough to be on social media and if you're old enough to be on your device or any device like behind closed doors or alone without parent eyes watching every move that you make, I think you're old enough to watch this show. Do you
Mm-hmm.
disagree?
No, I agree.
You think it's
Yeah.
too scary for some kids?
No, I
Hmm.
think it's important. I think it's no scarier than the rest of the shows that they're watching in middle school.
Hmm.
It's just
Okay.
more realistic, but yeah.
Okay. So parents saying, or even psychologists saying that they think this is too scary for kids to watch, you think those parents are probably just misinformed and don't realize what their kids are actually doing?
Yeah, I think your kid has definitely seen worse than that if they have access to their own devices.
Okay. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There it is. We broke it all down. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah. And if you haven't watched the show and you're like, oh, well, now I know what it's about, you should still watch it
I agree.
because it's good.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Um, okay. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye. Have a great
Bye.
week. Thanks for listening today, guys. I hope you picked up some tips, tools, maybe some baby steps for creating more balance and boundaries in your life. And I just wanted to let you know if you want to continue moving the needle forward in creating this for yourself, having a happier household, I want you to go to my website and check out mastermindparenting.com. We have 3 beginning programs, and if you need some accountability and more support, then please look for the one that would be a good fit for you. And as always, we're on all the social channels under Mastermind Parenting. On Instagram, it's mastermind_parenting. And periodically I do pop up on different Instagram lives, Facebook lives, where I give you teaching and coaching, and I love engaging with you live to help you help your strong-willed kids so that they can feel better, because when they feel better, they do better. And I love, love, love getting to know you guys. So thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Super, super appreciative.